very sweet, very kind, very gentle. And then growing up, we had chameleons, white mice. What's the thing that runs in the hamsters?
Yeah.
Tropical fish and goldfish in separate areas. A dog. Really, the only thing we never had was a cat. And Mom always had a cat growing up. She was an only child, so she would dress the cat in little baby clothes and take it for a walk on the stroller. But for some reason, we didn't have a cat. And
You're eating half the other things in your menagerie.
Dad's family, I mean, as far as Grandma and Aunt Gertie, that you didn't have a pet.
They were strict,
Did
German,
not,
very
yeah,
clean,
no
gross.
pets. They didn't seem to mind them, except for the one time that John, always John, wanted to have a flying bat.
No, a flying squirrel.
A flying squirrel. And he was so excited, and Grandma and Aunt Gertie were over at that time. It was probably for Sunday dinner. And he said, Grandma Zotter said to him, I will not be coming over if you get a flying squirrel. And without a moment of hesitation, John responded, I'm going to miss you, Grandma.
I didn't say that.
You certainly did, because
Okay.
Mom talked about that for a long time, and everybody was laughing. I didn't think it was nearly
Turns
that
out
funny.
they were selling rabid ones anyway, so we never got one.
Oh, God.
Jeez. So
Yeah.
obviously we were very Catholic on that side of the family. What was the name of the church that you attended?
St. Teresa of Avila,
But Grandma and Grandpa were married where?
St. Boniface.
And were you ever mentioned in a newspaper?
I was mentioned when Michelle wrote about, and so was John, when she wrote about us when she worked at the Michigan Catholic.
Yeah, that was much later.
Yeah,
Who
so no.
were your friends when you were growing up? You talked about
The ones I talked about already.
Betty Carroll, Bonnie Duffy,
Oh.
Trudy
Vulcans.
Bolkins. I was like, Trudy Sumter.
And Mary Lacana.
And Mary Lacano, who became Mary
Thank
Majeski, or Vicky Majeski. And who were your friends growing up, Uncle John?
Mostly I hung out with Denny,
Denny.
because he was an avid, in fact, he would, before he knew me, he would take a bus downtown to go fishing with all the gear and with the buckets and the rods and wheels.
We did a lot of
Yeah.
buses.
We were joking the last time I talked to him, today, two guys spending that much time together, they're obviously gay, obviously. And
Oh, I was accused of that with Trudy, too.
yeah, back then, we didn't know anybody that was, but
Nobody was out.
such a thing was supposed to have existed. We did, just like marijuana. We knew somebody who said they knew somebody who knew somebody who used it.
Right.
You asked if we knew any famous people, or was that just in my head?
That was in your head, but
Okay.
go ahead, we'll talk about
Because
that.
at the corner of our block on Virginia Park lived Rosa Parks. And
Is it on Dexter or the other end?
it was on Virginia Park and Wildermere. It was-
Wildermere, yeah, okay.
And she was a member of the block club, and I had to go collect for something, I don't know, for the block club. And she invited me into her home, very gracious, very loving, very quiet lady. Had I but known that she was important, I would have at least gotten an autograph, but had no idea she was anybody. And they made Mom was a secretary, the financial person for the block club. The only white person was the one in charge of money.
Carl saw the Miracles walking off to the Motown studios once. He knew who they were,
Wow.
but
I didn't
I
know
didn't. Yeah,
That's-
walking down Wildermere on the way to the boulevard.
We
there.
were like 8 blocks away from Motown.
We were exactly 1.5 miles. I looked it
So
up the other
close.
day. Yeah.
What world events had the most impact on you when you were a child? And did any of them personally affect your family? And I think this is probably a good time to talk about the riots and that experience, because the Detroit Rebellion and the uprising really directly affected our family.
1967 riots, right?
Well,
You know, the riots also in '45 during the war.
definitely not talking about those.
Okay,
So, what you feel
I-
some experiences.
The only one that would have been living at the house at that time was me, and I was at the Montreal World's Fair with Trudy and Bonnie. So I was not home for it, but the story that came down, we were the only white family, and I was told that they had tanks coming down Virginia Park, down our street, and the neighbors came over and told Mom and Dad, pull the blinds, sleep on the floor, and you can come and stay at our house, or you could stay in your basement or whatever. We will bring you over food, we will bring you anything you need. Don't leave the house. Don't let them see you. Don't leave the house. And so our neighbors were phenomenal and protective and kind. And that's what I remember.
Do you have anything to add to that, Uncle John?
I was in Vietnam in the hospital at the time, so
Why were you in the hospital?
they thought I had hepatitis, which I may or may not have.
No,
I
they
tested
don't know.
negative for all the varieties, so
So
I
probably
had the
not
symptoms, but maybe not the disease.
then.
That's when he was supposed to get married and she didn't know what happened to him.
Right.
Nice.
Failed to show up for my wedding.
Good times. How were holidays celebrated in your family? Did you have special traditions, whether it's birthdays or Christmas or Easter?
Amazingly, we had no money, and yet I always felt like we had a lot. I mean, there were always gifts under the tree, some better than others. I'm sure some were bought at like Salvation Army or something. I know there wasn't enough money to spend
A
anything.
watch every year in high school.
Yeah, but
Uncle John, did you feel the same way? Because you were more cognizant of their lack of money. Did you feel that Christmases and holidays, that there wasn't enough physical
No.
stuff?
We got a model train that was a Marx, which were very cheap Japanese-made things compared to the Lionel, which was a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we that was our level of income. Marx trains, not like.
But you were still happy with
Yeah,
it.
oh yeah. Every Thanksgiving we went to Aunt Hilda's in East Detroit.
Mm-hmm. For
That
dinner.
was a big family gathering.
And then every birthday, no matter whose birthday it was, there was always a gift for the other two.
Mhm.
We always got it may have been a comic book, which were 10 cents at the time, by the way. And whoever's watching this now is going, are you
There was
kidding
always
me?
comic books
Yeah.
to read, always, yeah.
And but everybody was celebrated so that nobody was, not just one person. And I did that with you and Jenny.
What were your parents' occupations? So I know Grandma was, she always said not a housewife, she was a homemaker. And Grandpa was in insurance sales, but then when he left the insurance business, what did he do? Because he was still working.
He was still a salesman. He would just do
A peddler.
right anything from jewelry to anything he could get his hands on that he could make some money. He peddled it.
Go to the gas station, little stores.
He
or
would
whatever.
barter for various things. Enough to survive. He was actually, before Mom and Dad met, he was an elevator operator. Was it for the
He also worked in a machine shop for a while.
Yeah, but Dad absolutely detested being inside. He needed freedom. He needed to be out and about. And so, probably not making the wisest financial choice, he quit all those jobs and became a salesman and worked out of his home.
How is the world different today from what it was like when you were a child?
It was
And
so much better.
it's so much better now, or so
No,
much
it
better
was so
then?
much better then.
It's just
Why?
as corrupt now as it ever was.
No, I meant we were. You are so bad.
Well, why?
Okay,
What
because
makes you say
we
that?
could.
What? Well, when a politician spends $2 or $3 million to get elected for a job that pays $100,000 a year, you got to wonder what's going on.
Yeah, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about
Okay.
when we were growing up.
Well,
Okay.
no, that's his perspective of how the world has changed.
Oh,
He's saying it's
piffle.
corrupt, then it's corrupt now.
Okay, I've got a two-word phrase that I have yet to hear anyone charge. Governments lie. No one has yet said, no, that's not true. They don't. Everyone knows they do.
I think they do.
Yeah.
Okay, so going
Yeah.
back to our childhood, we could literally go out when we woke up and come back when it was time for dinner. Everybody on the block, there was no exceptions, would yell at you if you did something you shouldn't have done, or we had so much freedom, and we never worried about kidnapping, or we never worried about shootings, or we never worried about any of that. It was just so
So,
free.
I would counter, and this could be my, philosophy, that Miles still has that ability. I would agree that there's less community now than there was then, but I think there are still places that have that level of community. And the other thing I would counter is that historically white people think things have gotten worse, but black people don't agree with that.
Well, maybe it should have been. Yeah.
That black people have said, well, yeah, that was your experience, but that's not my experience. I didn't have that level of
Did you
freedom.
feel the same
Everybody
way
has
I
their own
did?
experience.
It's
Yeah, we didn't feel look, we were taught not to talk to strangers, but of course
Yeah,
we did.
Of
I mean,
course, we did all the
Of course
time.
we did.
We couldn't get anybody's car and went to the grocery store at that time, and I had too many groceries to carry home, and he said, I'll drive you, and I said, okay. And I got home, and Mom said, how'd you get home? And I said, Leo drove me, and she said, who's Leo? Yeah.
So you feel it was safer then?
Yeah, I do.
It probably was, yeah. They didn't.
Something interesting.
They
we
weren't
should look
promoting perversion in the way they do today. How's
up.
that?
Right.
We used to have peddlers that would come down the street to sharpen your knives or whatever, and Mom always gave every one of them a sandwich, no matter how things were
Oh,
at
they
the house.
weren't doing that. They were just beggars. They would ring
And-
our doorbell.
Well, that
Do you
too.
have anything I can eat?
And she would say,
Wow.
but she would not let them in the house. They had to stay outside, but she would pack lovely little bag lunch for them, and they would go to the step at the bottom of the porch, and they would just sit there and eat everything. And
I feel like then, because that doesn't sound like a particularly safe neighborhood.
no, they were
that-
safe.
But yeah, that was your experience, your expectation that it's not necessarily safer or less safe now.
I think it's much less safe
Well,
now.
that area certainly is less safe now.
Well, that's
So-
and again,
So what do you say? What do you mean by less safe? Because I'm gonna do some research on this afterwards. Like, what do you mean by what constitutes less safe for you?
Violent crime, probably, yeah.
So violent crime in the area that you were growing up
yeah.
versus your current area.
Well, we were 8 blocks from the riot when it started, so yeah.
And the incidents we had when the neighborhoods turned black, the blacks would have cost us. If there were more blacks than white, then the blacks would attack. But not, at the worst, sometimes you'd see a knife. You never heard about a gun. Now it's
No.
all, everybody.
And
has it.
then Dad would say, because I was a girl and I had to be better protected, he would say, if you are in the neighborhood, in this neighborhood, and you are tapped from behind by a car, you are not to get out of your car to check the damage. You are to continue, even if you run red lights, you are to go directly to a police department or a very open area where there were people around and you felt safe to report it. You are never to get out.
so safe.
Yeah.
But
She ran over a curb one day. She doesn't remember.
I still do.
Oh, you do remember? Okay. Then.
No, I mean, I
That's my
still run
point,
over a
that,
curb.
like that you're
Oh, okay. No,
That
we
you
were escaping
think of
some
it.
attackers, but okay.
as a that it was more safe then, when your stories really are suggesting it's
No.
probably less safe.
No. I was talking, I felt totally safe and different when I was maybe 8, 10, in that age bracket. By the time I was driving, I was 18 years old.
But I would
That's a different
suggest
world.
that perhaps you just weren't aware.
She's taking our stories and twisting them.
Yeah, I see it. Well,
Who knows? I mean, I could be wrong.
No.
I know, it's true. All right, who was the oldest relative you remember as a child, and what do you remember about them?